point, I wanted to talk about vulnerability, which I don't know if it's harder for guys than gals, since you and I are guys, certainly something that we can speak to. I think we're all taught, especially from a professional standpoint, is never to show weakness. Don't be vulnerable. But I think this does the complete opposite. The inability to show vulnerability puts up walls and it just gets surface level interaction. When you hear like the term like putting on the cloak or the mask, what kind of comes to mind?
Society, and especially in the professional space, or it makes me think of like LinkedIn for some reason. It's society in large and places like LinkedIn. It almost like rewards stoicism, right? That this idea that vulnerability equals weakness. And this creates this false narrative that is you're strong and you're successful. That means like you have everything together, like you don't need help, right? So it does make it challenging to switch from this outer persona of competence to like emotional openness, right? Which is required for forming deeper, more intimate relationships. So oftentimes, I think the skills that are needed for professional success, which equates to like being in control of your emotions, like being independent. Oftentimes, those skills don't really translate to building authentic, deep, like loving connections, right? Whether it's with a romantic partner or if it's with friends that you just want to like build a close bond with.
A lot of people are coming to our retreat in January. We're setting people up to come to Hawaii and interact with people that they've never met before. Some of the worst things that you can do is put up your guard and it's useful to justify why we're all like that, right? Like in a
Mm.
professional setting, you're supposed to have your shit together. You're supposed to be a leader. And a lot of us that were taught, modeled from our parents, were this stoic persona.
Exactly. It's a hard thing because especially when you see other people have that mask on, then there's also this risk that if I open up, will it be reciprocated, right? Or will it just look like I have an egg on my face? Is it gonna look weird that I'm just oversharing?
What is your kind of your mindset? You're going into a new situation. You don't know a lot of these strangers. To me, I'm going to hold my own ground, but I'm going to go in with a mindset of I'm here to learn with an open mind. And at least that primes me going into interactions and with kind of my heart open and it
Mhm.
shows on your
Mhm.
expressions and it's the openness.
Mhm.
What is your kind of approach when you're jumped into these situations?
I've learned over the past, I would say, only in the past few years have I learned really firsthand the power of vulnerability. Right. So oftentimes when I'm meeting new people, the question comes up, wow, like why used to live in the East Coast in New York and now you're living on the West Coast in Vancouver. Like what prompted that change? Why did you move? And then I go into this short story of how my wife and I were really living on the outside, very successful lives. We're really busy. We're raising two young kids, both deeply involved in our careers. Everything's going well except for the most important relationship of all, which is our marriage. We stumbled into some hard times and we decided to make a great big life reset. Right. And I've learned that when I tell that story, there's a number of threads that people can latch onto to have a topic to converse about. But invariably, if it's someone that's interested in conversing, they're like, wow, that's amazing. Tell me more.
Who doesn't fight with their spouse, right?
So I've learned that actually it's a great icebreaker, and oftentimes it leads into much deeper conversations than in the past when just give like this default answer, which is, oh, I'm a practicing neurologist. I work here, blah, blah, blah. It's right. But you inject a little bit of openness, vulnerability, honesty, and invariably it resonates. And people become very curious and they want to know more. And then we get to talking and it quickly leads into the realm of personal development and growth. And yeah, I've definitely seen firsthand that just being vulnerable, it's very powerful and it can lead to forming the meaningful, deep connections in a networking setting. You don't expect to see these people again, right? But oftentimes I find that we exchange contact information, we keep in touch.
And I
Yeah.
point that out to people. You're not going to see these people again. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's actually easier in a way. But yeah, something you said, you have the stories formulated. And part of that is owning the stories too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes people, they reject those stories being their own in a
Yeah.
more metaphorical way. But so that's part of it is what are the kind of the giveaway stories or the giveaway vulnerabilities? Obviously, you're not going to just dump off the deep end. If you want to, then great. But
Yeah.
I think having a good place to start is a good place at least go in to start interactions with and have that ready. Because and most times I think you have to become like a leader. Like you know that you're probably one who needs to lead this interaction more than likely.
Yeah.
So you have to drop your pants first in a way.
Yes, drop it a little bit and then see if the
Yeah.
other person reciprocates.
We're not having that
Yeah,
kind of party,
yeah.
right? That's how it works.
And you touched on something just now. It's not always easy, right? Because of the story, like the story that we have for ourselves. A lot of us, what I've noticed is that there are things that we might be embarrassed about. There are things that we might have shame over. Right. So if that's the case, then yeah, it's going to be difficult to open up and be vulnerable. This, right? I think it requires some work beforehand, right? Like figuring out your own story, putting meaning behind your struggles, and then that's ultimately related to self-worth and self-esteem. So it's obviously easier to talk about some stories if you've already processed it in a way and where you get meaning out of it, right? So especially if you've gone through struggles before, you've gone through failures, and but you've derived meaning, you've learned lessons from it, and are willing to talk about it.
Maybe I've told this story a couple of times on the
Mhm.
podcast, but I was work my first job I was at for quite a while. I ran into issues with the boss and essentially was told to go find a new job. That's what
Yeah.
like a 90-day PIP plan is.
Yeah.
Dust off the resume. But that was a big shock to me because I got comfortable at this job. I grew up there in a way. I think it was like eight
Mhm.
years or something like. But that was resonated for me as like I never want to feel like I'm just can just be dumped like that again. At one time I was ashamed by that, but then
Mhm.
again, it's like everybody has something probably several times in their career go wrong
Yeah.
or investment or romantic relationship. It's everything. And I also like why do this? I think the benefits are so great. I have a group that I pay for this group, granted, but we get together every single month and we call them 5% reflections, where you
Mhm.
share the 5% most intimate things that sometimes you wouldn't even share with your spouse because you want to stay married and you don't want to rock the boat that much. Some people could argue with me on that, but having those kinds of relationships are so rich and valuable that I think that's something everybody wants. Maybe I'm wrong. You have to begin getting vulnerable.
100% agree. And I think ultimately to be fulfilled, we all want to tell our story. We all want to be understood, right? And obviously there's a risk of being ostracized or being made fun of or be looked down upon. There are those self-protective mechanisms that a lot of us hold. But ultimately it's when we become vulnerable and it's received with understanding and empathy, it's really amazing. You get this deep bond. And sometimes you can form these deep bonds in a relatively quick time, much quicker than a lot of these more like superficial relationships and so-called friendships that have been going on for a while.
Like at your work or
Mhm.
people you went to school, college with, these types of retreats it is an opportunity for you to take a risk. And the risk is a much higher level of a relationship. You can also strike out too, right?
Mm.
If
Yeah,
I think that's where we all play it safe generally with the people we see every single day, our neighbors, friends, family. We
yeah,
have to, you don't want to take risks with
correct.
that type of stuff.
Yeah. What I've observed working with a lot of high achievers or type A people is that contrary to popular belief, a lot of these high achievers, they're not very self-assured people all the time. And just they have everything together. I think a lot of these folks, a lot of us, we carry a lot of insecurities. Right? We carry a lot of imposter syndrome, insecurity of not being good enough. Am I making the best use of my time? And there's a lot of insecurities and fears that lie beneath the surface of a lot of high achievers. It's a double-edged sword, right? This insecurity is oftentimes what drives us forward. But there is this lingering piece, and I think that's where it's so powerful to share these fears, anxieties, insecurities with one another, and just to realize, hey, I'm not alone, right? You've struggled, I've struggled. We all have like our different struggles, and it's a great way to bond and connect.
The camaraderie is such a cool thing. If this is new to you and it's been a while since you dove
Mhm.
into a new group and it's not your fault, probably in a situation where you have to keep the status quo and keep the relationships and not take any risks. But yeah, if you're given a situation to kind of mess things up with people you'll never see again, then why not give it a try and just see if it's for you would be another plea I would make.
Yeah, I'm often going into these situations, you never know who you're going to meet, what opportunities are going to arise. You never know if somebody that you meet is going to end up collaborating with you on something down the road, but maybe not immediately, but at least you form a relationship or a friendship. You never know if somebody that you meet at this event is going to end up being in your what we call like the top five, right? Like those in your circle that they say like you are the average of the five people, right? Like, excluding your family and children, right?
Never know if it's your best man on your next wedding, right? When you get
Exactly.
divorced, right? You never know
Exactly.
what's
You
gonna
never
happen.
know. Yeah, exactly.
Paul's kind of alluding towards like the benefits, and he's gone through it and he is aware of, so it's motivating and fun at the same
Mm,
time. But granted, when you're getting into this situation, it is hard. I will definitely acknowledge that. On the other side of uncomfortable is the prize. If you have any questions, let us know.